Okay, let's be real for a second. Getting a medical report can feel, well, it can feel like trying to read a completely different language, right? It's filled with all this technical jargon, and honestly, it can be pretty intimidating. But that's exactly why we're here. We're going to walk through this report together, piece by piece, so you know exactly what it means.
So, take a look at this. This is a pretty standard pathology report. And yeah, at first glance, it's just a wall of text. But I promise you, behind all the medical terms, there's a story. And our job today is to translate that story so it all makes perfect sense.
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll just deconstruct the report itself. Then, we're going to peek through the microscope with the pathologist. After that, we'll focus on the single most important phrase in the whole document. We'll figure out what the final impression is, and, importantly, we'll talk about why more tests are sometimes needed. Sound good? Let's dive in.
All right, first things first. Before we can get into the nitty-gritty, we have to understand where this sample even came from. And that starts with this acronym you see right at the top, FNAC. What is that?
FNAC stands for fine needle aspiration cytology. It sounds way more complicated than it actually is. Basically, it's a really simple procedure where a doctor uses a super thin needle to draw out a tiny sample of cells from a lump. Think of it like taking a little snapshot of the cells inside so a pathologist can put them under a microscope and see what's going on. Now, you'll see a section on the report labeled gross. And no, that doesn't mean it's disgusting. It just refers to what the pathologist could see with their own eyes, before the microscope. And here, it tells us they received a small, blood-mixed sample from a 1 centimeter nodule in the left breast. So this little bit of fluid is our starting point. Okay, now for the fun part. This is where we get to the microscopic findings. The pathologist is basically a detective at this point, looking for clues among the cells. It might look like a bunch of jargon, but each one of these terms is a piece of the puzzle.
So the first thing they see is benign ductal cells. Let me tell you, the word benign is probably the best word you can see on a report like this. It literally means not harmful, or in this case, non-cancerous. These are just the normal, everyday cells that line the breast ducts. Finding these is a very, very good sign.
And right alongside those, the report mentions myoepithelial cells. You can think of these as the bodyguards for the ductal cells. They create a nice, protective layer around the ducts. When a pathologist sees both of these types of cells hanging out together, it's a huge thumbs up. It tells them the basic structure of the tissue is exactly as it should be. Another check in the good news column.
The report also notes a few other things, like stromal fragments, that's just connective tissue, and adipocyte clusters, which are just fat cells. All totally normal stuff. And then it says no granuloma. That's important because granulomas are a sign of a specific kind of inflammation. So the fact that they're not there is another reassuring finding. So far, every single clue is pointing towards healthy, normal tissue.
So we've collected a lot of clues, and they all seem to be pointing in a really positive direction. We've seen all the normal cells we'd expect to see, but let's be honest. There's really only one question that everyone wants the answer to when they get a report like this.
Right? After all the medical terminology and the lab work, it all boils down to this single crucial question. It's the reason for the test in the first place. And thankfully, this report gives us a crystal clear answer.
And there it is, right there in all caps, so you can't miss it. No malignant cells seen. Malignant is just the medical term for cancerous. This is it. This is the pathologist saying that in the sample they looked at, they found zero evidence of cancer. It's the best possible conclusion we could ask for.
Okay, so deep breath, we know it's not cancer, which is a massive relief. But then the question becomes, well, what is it? The final piece of the puzzle is in the impressions section. This is where the pathologist puts all the clues together and gives their official diagnosis.
The impression? A fibroadenoma. Now, don't let the long, complicated name scare you. This is actually incredibly common. It's one of the most common types of benign breast lumps out there, especially for younger women. It's just a harmless little bundle of normal tissue, and it is absolutely not life-threatening.
So we have a benign diagnosis. That's fantastic. But then you might get to the bottom of the report, to the advised section, and see a recommendation for more tests. And that can feel a little confusing. You might think, wait, if everything's fine, why do we need to do more? That is a great question, and it's all about being extra, extra careful.
So the report advises two things. First, clinical radiological correlation. That's just a fancy way of saying your doctor should compare these lab results with your mammogram or ultrasound to make sure everything lines up. It's like double-checking your work.
The second recommendation is a biopsy for confirmation. Remember, the FNAC only tested a small sample of cells. A biopsy takes a tiny piece of tissue, giving a much bigger, clearer picture. It's considered the gold standard to get a 100% absolutely certain diagnosis. It's not a sign of a problem, it's a sign of being thorough.
And just like that, we've taken a document that might have seemed confusing or even scary, and we've unpacked it. We've turned it into a story with a clear positive outcome. Knowing what these words mean is so empowering. It allows you to be an active partner in your own healthcare, not just a passenger. So it kind of makes you wonder, right? What other parts of our health journey could we make less stressful just by learning to speak the language?